governments there. So we said, screw you guys, we're going to create our own country, and we're willing to fight for it and die for it. And I think there are a lot of people that still have that attitude today that we need to separate. Well, I don't think this is the right thing to do, but that's a whole other matter. But concerning the Affordable Care Act, Congress, in its infinite stupidity, namely the Republicans, are threatening to shut down the government at all cost and to destroy Obamacare at all cost. And it really irritates me, because what's going to happen, I fear, is the government's going to get shut down next week. They're going to defund the Affordable Care Act, and in the process, a lot of companies are already pulling the plug on their health insurance plans and giving their employees options to go into a government assistance programs or go into these kiosks to find other plans outside of the company, basically freeing up the company from immediate responsibility of providing health care for their employees. So that's what's going on in that regard. Well, moving on to Plan B, House GOP leaders appear likely to give Tea Party lawmakers a chance to use a routine temporary government funding bill to try to muscle the Democratic-controlled Senate into derailing President Barack Obama's health care law. It's a strategy fraught with political risk for Republicans, who could find themselves bearing the blame for any partial government shutdown that results in an impasse with the Senate. Okay? Still with me so far? All right. I thought you were. Well, the Senate seems poised to reject the GOP move, strip the defund Obamacare idea from the legislation, and send a straightforward stopgap spending bill right back into the laps of House conservatives frustrated by their inability to unravel the health care bill and to get rid of Barack Obama. Well, GOP aides said the latest strategy was to be presented to rank-and-file Republicans at a closed-door meeting today. They required anonymity, I hate that word, anonymity to discuss the strategy because it had not been announced. Now, it's a reversal from an earlier strategy rejected last week by angry conservatives that would have sent the measure to the Senate as two bills to ensure that the Democratic-controlled chamber will be able to ship the spending measure straight to the White House and more easily avert a government shutdown after the September 30th end of the budget year. Well, the idea then was to avoid a subsequent vote on a clean stopgap spending bill in the House after Senate Democrats voted to strip out the provision. Stopgap funding bills are typically routine, with neither House nor Senate looking to use them to pick a fight. Well, the flaw in the fallback strategy is that if the Senate were to send the measure back, angry GOP conservatives might be looking for a fight and could withhold their votes rather than surrender to the Senate and its top Democrat Majority Leader Harry Reid of Nevada. Okay? Well, House Republicans are also looking at a vote soon to raise the government's $16.7 trillion borrowing cap on their own terms by pairing it with the roster of conservative priorities, including a renewed assault on the health care law and a mandate to build the Keystone XL pipeline. Well, conservatives want to take a must-pass bill hostage and add the assault on the Affordable Care Act in an attempt to force Obama and congressional Democrats to make concessions, while GOP leaders have viewed the effort with skepticism since Democrats would never go along. Now, the idea of defunding the health care law has been a goal of Tea Party conservatives, namely headed by Senator Ted Cruz of Texas and outside groups like the Heritage Foundation. Okay? Meanwhile, a large group of House conservatives intends to unveil legislation providing an expanded tax break for consumers who purchase their own health care coverage and increasing the government funding for high-risk pools, according to lawmakers who said the plan marked the Republicans' first comprehensive alternative to Obama's health care overhaul. Conservatives are frustrated that Republicans control only one chamber of Congress and have little chance to enact their agenda, over the opposition of Obama and Senate Democrats. On the record, GOP aides said no final decision has been made or will be made until House Republican leaders meet and talk tomorrow. That's according to Michael Steele, a spokesman for House Speaker John Boehner of Ohio. Now, a shutdown impasse would leave the government without funding, authority to pay its workers, including the military, or enter into new contracts until a bill is signed. Now, that's what we're facing here. Government shutdown isn't going to hurt Congress. It's not going to hurt their paychecks. It's going to hurt the poor lackeys working in the offices. It's going to hurt congressional aides and other programs like that. But essential programs like military, aircraft control, food inspection, disaster relief, and firefighting would continue to function since they're related to protecting life and property. So-called mandatory programs like Social Security and Medicare, which are funded as if on autopilot, would also continue. So those aren't in any danger right now. Well, national parks will most likely close. Most passport applications could not be processed, and the space program would largely be put on hold, among other results. Given the fact that the space shuttle program was decommissioned a couple of years ago, there's not a lot to worry about there, except we got astronauts aboard the International Space Station right now. So that's going to be even harder to get them home. A top Democrat in the House, Steny Hoyer of Maryland, said yesterday he would not support the stopgap funding bill under any circumstance, since it would fund programs at an annualized funding rate of $986 billion, a level consistent with automatic across-the-board spending cuts known as sequestration that Democrats are trying to reverse. Okay? But if the Democratic Senate goes along with that funding level, as insiders have signaled, and if Obama endorses the straightforward funding measure, House Democrats likely could be counted upon to provide the votes. The question is whether GOP leaders would want to pass the measure with help from the Democrats, which Boehner did on several occasions earlier this year, to the consternation of conservatives. So Boehner could still do what he's supposed to do, which is to work for the people and not for his party. But we'll see. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew said yesterday that the GOP move was a non-starter. The president's been clear. I've been clear. Efforts to either defund or delay the Affordable Care Act are unacceptable. Lew told the Economic Club of Washington that is not a path towards something that can ultimately be signed into law. Now, I admit that was a bit long-winded, but that's what we're facing as of today. And I believe it's time that we hold our lawmakers accountable and to do the right thing and not defund or derail this Affordable Care Act. Okay? It's the wrong thing to do on multiple levels. As I've said, a lot of companies have already done away with their health care plan and have gone to these government centers, sent their employees to these government centers to enroll in these programs. And if you derail it there, millions of more people are going to be without health care. And to me, what the Republicans are doing is something that they say they're largely against, which is an abortion. Now, I realize the Affordable Care Act is an inanimate object. It is a law. But it works a lot like an abortion, okay? In that the Republicans are playing this evil doctor, saying we don't want this, or rather saying that they're listening to the mother, which is their constituents, saying they don't want the Affordable Care Act, and yet are offering no alternative plan, so let's just get rid of the whole thing altogether. No, we can't go back. We crossed a line 4 years ago, when President Obama brought this plan forward, pushed for it, got it into law. You can't simply just wipe it away because the problems still exist. And the Republicans are going to try to brush this under the rug. We've been fighting for health care coverage, universal health care coverage in this country for over a century now. You're not just going to throw it away just because you don't like the president or his policies. You're here to serve the good of the will of the people. And perhaps the good of the will of the people, or rather the majority of the people, say they don't want it. Well, I don't like going to the doctor either. I do everything I can to avoid health care. But you know what? That comes back to haunt you. That comes back to hurt you. And I nearly died 3 years ago because I refused to check up on some symptoms that I had prior to being diagnosed with diverticulitis. In the hospital, in a 3-day span, yes, it cost me over 20 grand. Thankfully, my health insurance paid the majority of it. I still had to pay 2 grand out of pocket for, the ambulance ride to the hospital, and then plus for my 3-day stay in the hospital. But in that time, I was diagnosed with anemia, high blood pressure, acid reflux disease, and diverticulitis. All right. Plus, I was checked out for for cancer in the intestine and the stomach. I had a colonoscopy. My GI tract was checked out. So, yeah, that's what I was facing. I had 3 blood transfusions while I was in there, too. So, I'm very much in favor of universal health care coverage. And if that turns this country into a socialist nation, so what? If that's what you believe, what honor is there in dying because you refuse to get treatment? There is no honor in that. That's just plain stupidity. That is just really stupid. Because if you can fix a problem, then you have a way to pay for that repair, then do it. Because my dad had the same attitude about healthcare, and guess what? He's dead now. That's why this is so personal to me. If you don't want it, then I guess that's your prerogative. But to me, it seems only logical to want to live. And sometimes you've got to bite the bullet, as it were, and face up. Alright? If it's against your beliefs, well, I can't do anything for you in that regard. I'll just have to respect it. Respect your decision. I just don't respect your reasoning. So that's why health care coverage is so personal to me. And I could bring up another family story, one just as, in your face type of thing. But out of respect to my mother, I will refrain from talking about that. Okay? Alright. So that's where I stand on that. Focusing on Missouri, I have a feeling this is going to be a long opening, so I hope you have plenty of coffee or whatever it is your morning beverage of choice is, because I've got a lot to talk about. Bringing it closer to home is a former state representative has criticized the House leadership here in the state of Missouri after House Bill 253's defeat during the recent veto session. For those of you not in the know about Missouri politics, a Missouri House Republican who voted to uphold Democratic Governor Jay Nixon's veto of tax-cutting legislation seemed to criticize House Speaker Tim Jones in an email to colleagues who also opposed the override. Representative Nate Walker wrote he knows fellow Republicans opposing the override are of the highest integrity, which is something that I can not say for our Speaker Tim Jones. What a disgrace he has become. Walker said Jones has been talking out of both sides of his mouth and throwing us under his Attorney General campaign bus. Jones said he previously is considering a run for Attorney General. Well, Walker of Kirksville also stated that if anyone needs any moral support, please feel free to call me anytime. He served in the legislature from 81 to 85, lost in a Republican lieutenant governor primary in 84, and returned earlier this year to the state house. Walker said yesterday in an interview the email was not intended for public distribution. He said he does not want to cause Jones further heartburn, but that he hasn't been very kind to us. Walker said there were threats before last week's veto session. During it and afterward, he added he does not question Jones' integrity, and that the portion about speaking from both sides of his mouth and throwing people under the bus was sarcasm. Walker said he is willing to apologize if Jones thinks that is appropriate. I'm still a member of the Republican caucus. Tim Jones is my speaker, and I look forward to working with him. Walker said, and we just have to get past this little bump. Sorry, my note was screwed up. And the bump in the road. Nate is Jones said, "Yes."